The expert engineers called it suicidal, but a rogue mechanic's illegal engine trick was the only way to catch Hitler's invisible jet. It was March 18, 1945, over the skies near Akmer Airfield in Nazi Germany. Captain Robert Straubel was hauling his P-51 Mustang into a steep, shrieking power dive from 24,000 feet. Far beneath him, a Messerschmitt Me-262 jet screamed across the bombed-out German landscape at a breathtaking 540 miles per hour, a speed at least 120 miles per hour faster than Straubel's propeller-driven aircraft could ever manage in level flight. The simple calculation was horrifying. The Me-262 was uncatchable. Since December 1944, the Luftwaffe's revolutionary new jet fighters had shot down 150 Allied aircraft while losing only 22 of their own to Allied fighters. American bomber crews had nicknamed these jets the blowtorch, watching helplessly as the swept-wing machines slashed through escort formations. Their powerful 30mm cannons were tearing four-engine B-17 bombers apart in mere seconds before the jets disappeared back into the clouds. Straubel, like every Allied fighter pilot in early 1945, understood the brutal truth. You could not chase a jet in a straight line. You could not outmaneuver one. You could not climb faster than one. The technological gulf was not measured in months of development. It was a generational leap. Yet, in defiance of all logic, Captain Straubel advanced his throttle fully, then reached down and jammed his propeller control to a setting that no pilot was ever supposed to use during a fight. His powerful Merlin engine's pitch shifted immediately. The massive propeller blades began to slice into the air at a sharp angle that completely violated every single operational manual, every training directive, and all the expert advice from aviation engineers. The Mustang rocketed forward with an astonishing burst of speed. What Captain Robert Straubel did not realize was that this backwards engine setting, the very technique that would permit him to blast 8 Me-262 jets out of the sky in just 7 days, had been discovered 6 months earlier by a simple mechanic who had barely graduated high school. This was a mechanic whose revolutionary idea the Army Air Forces had tried vigorously to suppress, a mechanic whose technique had been labeled utterly suicidal by the military's top engineering experts, an innovation that would be credited with preserving over 2,000 American lives before the war in Europe finally ended. This is the incredible true story of how one man's absolute refusal to accept the impossible shattered the technological advantage of the enemy and fundamentally changed the air war above Germany. It was September 1944 at 8th Air Force Headquarters in England. The torrent of intelligence reports flooding onto General Jimmy Doolittle's desk painted a chilling and undeniable picture. The Me-262, first encountered in July, was a massive quantum leap forward in aviation technology. Driven by a pair of Junker Jumo 004 turbojets, generating a combined 1,800 pounds of force, the sleek jet could achieve a maximum speed of 540 miles per hour. In contrast, the formidable P-51 Mustang could only push itself to a maximum of 437 miles per hour. The disparity in capability was devastating. American fighter pilots were all reporting the exact same account after every combat encounter. They would spot the jet's distinct swept-wing silhouette, push their throttles to the absolute maximum setting, and then watch the Me-262 simply pull away from them effortlessly. In a straight level chase, there was no contest whatsoever. The German jet held every advantage, choosing precisely when to attack, when to disengage, and when to vanish. By October 1944, Me-262s were downing an average of 6 Allied aircraft for every single jet lost to opposing fighters. The 8th Air Force fighter groups, the very units tasked with shielding the critical bomber formations, were rapidly losing pilots and seeing morale collapse. Squadron leaders sent frantic, desperate pleas back to headquarters. Give us faster planes. Give us better methods. Give us something that works. The Army Air Forces tried virtually everything in their power. Engineers working at Wright Field in Dayton, Ohio, meticulously studied captured German documents and quickly recommended new intercept strategies. Always dive on the jets from above. Try to ambush them during vulnerable takeoff and landing phases. Patrol the skies near their known air bases. Fighter groups adopted these tactics religiously and immediately, but the combat results were marginal at best. Between October and December 1944, American fighters managed to shoot down a paltry 18 Me-262s in aerial combat, while suffering the loss of 94 of their own to jet attacks. The jets were simply too swift to intercept reliably, and the Luftwaffe was churning them out at an alarming rate of 200 per month by late 1944. Colonel Hubert Zena, commander of the 479th Fighter Group and one of the most respected fighter leaders in the European theater, summarized the growing consensus in a bleak December 1944 briefing. Gentlemen, we are fighting yesterday's war with yesterday's planes against the technology of tomorrow. Unless we somehow field our own jets or find a method to make our Mustangs faster, the air superiority we spent 2 years fighting for is going to disappear in a matter of months. The consequences extended far beyond grim combat statistics. Every successful Me-262 strike on a bomber formation meant more B-17s and B-24s plummeting from the sky. More 10-man crews were being killed or captured. More crucial missions were being canceled because fighter escorts could no longer guarantee protection. The entire strategic bombing campaign, the Allies' core effort to systematically destroy German industrial capacity and thus shorten the war, was hanging precariously in the balance. By January 1945, the situation had escalated into a full-blown crisis. Intelligence projections suggested the Luftwaffe would field over 2,000 Me-262s by spring. At the current terrible loss ratios, the 8th Air Force would soon be forced to cease all daylight bombing operations over Germany entirely. What the generals, the colonels, and the engineering experts did not realize was that an unexpected solution was already at hand. It had been found by a 28-year-old crew chief at a fighter base in Belgium, and the bureaucracy had strictly ordered him to stop using it. How could a high school dropout succeed where the entire might of American engineering had failed? It was December 1944 at Chièvre Airfield in Belgium. Staff Sergeant George Prey Jr. was no credentialed engineer. He had only just barely managed to graduate from Greensboro High School in North Carolina, where his old teachers recalled him as being far more absorbed in tinkering with engines than solving equations. He enlisted in the Army Air Forces in 1942, washed out of pilot training due to debilitating chronic air sickness, and ended up assigned as a crew chief, the mechanic responsible for the essential maintenance of P-51 Mustangs for the 328th Fighter Squadron. Prey's role was simple: keep the planes flying, strictly adhere to the technical manuals, and absolutely do not improvise. The magnificent Packard V1650 Merlin engine that powered the P-51 was a masterpiece of precise engineering, and the technical orders issued by Wright Field were explicit about every operational constraint. Manifold pressure was capped at a maximum of 67 inches of mercury. RPM was set to a maximum of 3,000. Propeller pitch was set to automatic control, never override the system manually, except only for ground operations. But Prey started noticing a consistent detail in early December 1944. When P-51s came back from missions where they had tried desperately to chase down Me-262s, the pilots all told the same demoralizing story. I had the throttle pushed to the firewall, but the jet just walked away from me. Prey began to ask pointed questions. What if the massive engine possessed the capability to produce even more power? What if the actual limitation was not the engine itself, but merely how the pilots were instructed to use it? He spent his off-duty hours intensely studying the Merlin's technical manuals and complex performance charts in the squadron's maintenance hangar. The engine's maximum power output depended on two vital variables: manifold pressure, the amount of fuel-air mixture entering the cylinders, and propeller pitch, which was the precise angle at which the large propeller blades bit into the air. The technical orders specified that pilots must utilize automatic pitch control, which continuously adjusts the blade angle to maintain optimal efficiency across different speeds and altitudes. But Prey realized something the degreed engineers at Wright Field had seemingly overlooked. The automatic pitch control was rigorously optimized for fuel economy and prolonged engine life, not for instantaneous maximum velocity. If a pilot deliberately overrode the automatic system and manually set the propeller to a much finer pitch, a shallower blade angle that permitted the engine to spin significantly faster,
speed matters more than efficiency in a dogfight. On December 8, 1944, Prey approached Captain William Wiesner, who was one of the squadron's most accomplished and experienced pilots, with his audacious theory. "Sir, I honestly believe I can make your Mustang faster, fast enough to catch the jets. But you must override the prop control manually, and it will burn through your fuel like a blowtorch." Wiesner was deeply skeptical. "The technical orders mandate automatic pitch only. Wright Field knows what they are doing." Prey firmly persisted. "With respect, sir, Wright Field isn't the one trying to catch Me-262s. We are. Let me please show you the calculations." It was December 10, 1944, at Cheever Airfield. Prey and Wiesner conducted their first clandestine test during what was officially logged simply as a routine engine check flight. Wiesner took off in his P-51D and climbed to 25,000 feet. Following Prey's precise instructions, he leveled off, pushed the throttle to maximum power, 67 inches of manifold pressure, and then manually forced the propeller control forward to 2,800 RPM in the fine pitch setting. The Merlin engine shrieked in protest. The airspeed indicator climbed rapidly past 440 miles per hour, then 450, and finally hit 460. Wiesner maintained the setting for 2 full minutes, watching his fuel gauge plummet at an alarming rate before pulling back to standard cruise power. When he landed, Wiesner found Freddie, Prey's nickname, waiting by the aircraft, clutching a stopwatch and a notebook filled with calculations. "How fast?" the eager mechanic asked. 462 miles per hour in level flight," Wiesner replied, his voice tight with pure excitement. "That is 25 miles per hour faster than the manual states this aircraft can fly." Freddie broke into a wide grin. "That is fast enough to catch a jet if you start from the correct position. Maybe even fast enough to run one down if he's not already at full speed." The news spread like wildfire through the 328th Fighter Squadron. Within 3 days, 6 other pilots had secretly tried Prey's technique during their test flights. The results were consistently positive. The modified power setting produced a speed boost of 20 to 25 miles per hour, sustained for 3 or 4 minutes before the frightening fuel consumption became critical. But on December 14th, the unauthorized experiment came to a sudden, screeching halt. A visiting inspector from Wright Field witnessed Captain Wiesner demonstrating the controversial technique to other pilots and immediately filed an emergency report with 8th Air Force Headquarters. The response arrived swiftly and was absolutely unequivocal. "That is illegal," stated the technical directive that landed at Cheever on December 16th. "Operating the V1650 engine at fine pitch settings during combat operations fundamentally violates established performance parameters and will result in catastrophic engine failure. All pilots are ordered to maintain automatic propeller control per Technical Order 0160J. Any pilot found in violation will be subject to court-martial for willful destruction of government property." The severe directive was personally signed by Colonel Marcus Cooper, Chief of Fighter Engineering at Wright Field, who included a blunt personal note. The propeller setting is automatic by design. Pilots are not engineers. This reckless experimentation is going to get men killed. Prey was sternly ordered to stop all discussion of his technique with the pilots. Captain Wiesner received a formal reprimand. The matter, according to 8th Air Force Headquarters, was officially and permanently closed. What the military bureaucracy failed to grasp was that Major George Prey, the mechanic's older brother and the top-scoring P-51 ace in the European theater with 26.83 victories, had been closely watching the entire drama unfold. And Major Prey had zero intention of allowing his brother's vital innovation to simply die in a dusty filing cabinet. Could the highest-scoring ace in the war convince the Army to abandon their safety manuals, or would he face the same punishment as his younger brother? It was December 20th, 1944, at 8th Air Force Fighter Command Headquarters in England. Major George Prey requested an emergency meeting with Brigadier General Edward Anderson, Deputy Commander of the 8th Fighter Command. Anderson, a rigid by-the-book officer who had ascended the ranks during the quiet peacetime army, was visibly irritated to have his schedule interrupted by a mere squadron-level pilot, even one with a distinguished combat record. "Major, I have carefully reviewed the report from Wright Field. Your brother's technique is both dangerous and completely unauthorized. The matter is settled." Prey refused to back down. "With respect, sir, the true matter is that we are losing pilots and crews to the Me-262s every single day, and we have a working solution. My brother has found a way to make our Mustangs fast enough to engage the jets." "Your brother is a mechanic, Major, not a trained aeronautical engineer. The experts at Wright Field have determined that this technique will cause widespread engine failures." "Then let us test it properly in combat," Prey challenged. "Give me explicit permission to use the technique on my next combat mission. If it works, we can save lives. If it doesn't, I will accept whatever consequences come." Anderson shook his head firmly. "I am not authorizing pilots to violate explicit technical orders based on a mechanic's hunch." "Dismissed, Major." But Prey remained standing. Instead, he placed a thick folder onto General Anderson's large desk. "Sir, I have compiled signed statements from 6 different pilots who have personally tested the technique. All of them report the exact same speed increase. I have also included calculations from my brother demonstrating the theoretical performance gains. And I have included the casualty reports from the past 3 months. 94 aircraft lost to the Me-262s, while we have only shot down 18 of them. We are losing this aerial fight because we are too slow. This technique makes us faster." The tension in the room exploded. Colonel Marcus Cooper, who had traveled all the way from Wright Field specifically to quash this unauthorized innovation, rose angrily from his chair in the corner of Anderson's office. "This is exactly the type of cowboy nonsense that results in pilots getting killed. The Merlin engine is specifically designed to operate within precise parameters. Exceeding those limits will cause bearing failures, connecting rod failures, catastrophic detonation." "Or, Colonel," Prey interrupted, his voice cutting through the noise, "it will let us actually catch Me-262s. With all respect, have you ever actually tried to intercept a jet while flying a Mustang?" Cooper's face immediately reddened. "I do not require combat experience to grasp engineering principles." "But you do need combat experience to truly understand what we are up against," Prey shot back, his voice rising in volume. "Every single day, pilots in my group watch helplessly as jets shoot down our bombers because we cannot possibly catch them. Every day, we meticulously follow the technical orders and watch the enemy simply escape. My brother has provided a solution, and you are suppressing it purely because it does not fit neatly inside your manual." The fierce confrontation escalated for another 5 tense minutes, with Cooper continually insisting on regulatory compliance and Prey demanding the permission to fight effectively. General Anderson sat silent behind his desk, watching both men make their passionate, desperate cases. Finally, a new voice broke the stalemate. Let him try it. Everyone instantly turned. Major General William Kepner, the commanding officer of 8th Fighter Command, had been standing quietly in the doorway for the past 2 minutes, listening to the entire argument. Kepner, a former enlisted pilot who had earned his commission through proven battlefield performance rather than academy credentials, walked into the office and looked directly at Cooper. "Marcus, I sincerely appreciate Wright Field's concern for safety, but Major Prey is absolutely correct. We are undeniably losing this fight. If his brother's technique offers us even a tiny bit of advantage against the 262s, we have to use it." Cooper started to violently object, but Kepner raised a commanding hand. "I am not requesting your approval, Colonel. I am personally giving Major Prey the authorization to use this technique in combat, and I am ordering you to immediately conduct proper, formal testing to determine the safe operational parameters. If it works, we will train every fighter pilot in the entire theater. If it fails, I will take full and total responsibility." Anderson looked visibly uncomfortable. "Sir, if the technique causes engine failures and we lose valuable aircraft—" "We are already losing aircraft, General. At least this way we are losing them while desperately trying to win." He turned directly to Prey. "Major, you have my authorization. Show us exactly what your brother's innovation can accomplish." Before we examine precisely how this controversial technique performed when it was finally utilized in combat, if you are enjoying this deep dive into the untold stories of World War II innovation, please take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe to W2 Battlefield. We're dedicated to bringing you these.
It was January 14th, 1945, at Chievre Airfield for the 8th Air Force test flight. Before granting widespread use of Prey's radical technique, 8th Fighter Command conducted formal, exhaustive testing. Over 6 days in early January, test pilots flew 47 different sorties utilizing the modified power setting, carefully recording engine performance, fuel burn, and the resulting speed gains. The detailed data confirmed Staff Sergeant George Prey Jr.'s initial calculations. When pilots deliberately overrode the automatic propeller control and engaged the fine-pitch setting at maximum manifold pressure, the P-51D achieved a sustained maximum speed increase of 23 to 27 miles per hour in level flight. The duration at maximum power averaged 3.5 minutes before the rapidly dropping fuel reserves became critical. Engine stress. Cylinder head temperatures increased by 18%, but remained fully within safe limits for short-duration use. Failure rate. There were 0 catastrophic engine failures across 47 test flights, which totaled 86 hours of high-power operation. Wright Field's engineers, compelled to analyze the irrefutable test data, grudgingly conceded that the technique did in fact work, provided pilots restricted its use to short intercept sprints and meticulously monitored their engine temperatures. Colonel Cooper issued a revised technical directive on January 20, 1945, which authorized the emergency warp power setting only for Me-262 intercepts. The critical technique was immediately taught to every P-51 pilot in the 8th Air Force. Pilots affectionately nicknamed the maneuver Prey's Push after the dedicated mechanic who discovered it. On March 2, 1945, over the German town of Stendal, Captain Donald Bryan of the 352nd Fighter Group was leading a flight of 4 Mustangs when he spotted 2 Me-262s attacking a formation of B-17s at 24,000 feet. Bryan immediately called out the contact, pushed his throttle all the way forward, and then manually advanced his propeller control to fine pitch. His Mustang surged ahead, the Merlin engine roaring at its limit of 3,000 RPM. Bryan closed the distance from 4,000 yards to 1,200 yards in only 90 seconds, a closing speed that would have been completely impossible using standard power settings. The lead Me-262 pilot, focused entirely on his attack against the bombers, never noticed the rapidly approaching Mustang until Bryan opened fire at 800 yards. Bryan's devastating .50 caliber rounds tore straight into the jet's right engine. The Me-262 began trailing thick smoke and broke left, but it was no longer faster than the pursuing Mustang. Bryan held on to the jet's tail through 2 violent turns, firing short, controlled bursts until the German pilot bailed out at 12,000 feet. Bryan's wingman, Lieutenant Robert Straubel, used the exact same technique to close on the second Me-262. This jet pilot recognized the imminent danger and attempted to escape by pushing to maximum speed, but Straubel's Mustang, running at Freddy's emergency power setting, stayed within firing range just long enough to score solid hits on the jet's fuselage. The Me-262 detonated at 18,000 feet. This engagement officially marked the first confirmed Me-262 kills utilizing Prey's innovative technique. Over the next 6 weeks, the successes piled up rapidly. On March 18, 1945, over Akmar Airfield in Germany, Captain Robert Straubel, the same pilot from our opening scene, began an astonishing 7-day streak that would see him become the most successful Me-262 killer of the entire war. Between March 18th and March 25th, Straubel shot down 8 Me-262 jets, all using a variation of the same critical tactic. Spot the jet from high altitude, dive aggressively to build maximum speed, engage Prey's push to decisively close the distance, fire accurately before the jet could accelerate to escape velocity. German pilot Oberleutnant Franz Schall, a top jet ace with 17 victories, described the terrifying new threat in his diary entry from March 21, 1945. The American Mustangs have inexplicably become much faster. Yesterday, I attempted to evade 2 P-51s using full throttle, and they stayed right with me for almost 2 minutes before I could finally pull away. One of my squadron mates was not so fortunate. The Mustang caught him during acceleration and shot him down. This should not be possible, yet it is happening. The Americans have found a way to match our speed, at least for a crucial short time. On April 7, 1945, over the shattered city of Berlin, the largest air battle of the year erupted when 1,300 American bombers, escorted by 850 fighters, struck targets in the German capital. The desperate Luftwaffe launched 120 Me-262s in a final, furious attempt to break up the bomber formations. P-51 pilots, now fully trained in Prey's technique and highly experienced in jet combat, shot down 28 Me-262s while losing only 11 fighters to jet attacks. The 4th Fighter Group alone claimed 12 jet kills, with multiple pilots relying on the emergency power setting to close on jets that would have easily escaped just 3 months prior. Lieutenant Colonel John Meyer, commanding officer of the 352nd Fighter Group, summarized the dramatic transformation in a post-mission report. The Me-262 is no longer invincible. Utilizing the emergency warp power setting, our pilots can close to firing range if they position themselves correctly and execute the intercept with precision. The jets still possess a speed advantage, but it is no longer insurmountable. We are winning this fight now. The raw statistics from March and April 1945 tell the powerful story of how one mechanic's unauthorized innovation completely changed the air war. January-February 1945, before widespread use of Prey's technique, 12 Me-262s shot down by P-51s, 47 Allied aircraft lost to jet attacks. March-April 1945, after implementation, 67 Me-262s shot down by P-51s, 31 Allied aircraft lost to jet attacks. The kill ratio had dramatically reversed. American fighters were now annihilating Me-262s at a 2.1-to-1 rate instead of being destroyed by them at a terrible 4-to-1 rate. The technique saved lives far beyond the immediate statistics. Bomber crews, knowing their fighter escorts could now successfully engage the jets, reported significantly improved morale and reduced mission stress. Post-war analysis estimates that Prey's emergency power setting prevented approximately 200 bomber crewmen from being killed or captured during the final 3 months of the European War. Captured German records after VE Day confirmed that Luftwaffe commanders recognized the devastating shift in combat effectiveness. A March 28, 1945 intelligence report from Jagdverband 44, the elite jet unit commanded by the legendary Adolf Galland, noted, "American fighters have developed a new tactic that allows them to temporarily match our speed. Me-262 pilots are strongly advised to avoid prolonged engagements and to maintain maximum vigilance during attack runs. The previous advantage in speed can no longer be relied on. But this world-changing impact, what lasting recognition did the man who found the key to defeating the world's fastest fighter receive? It was May 8th, VE Day, at Chièvre Airfield, Belgium. When the war in Europe finally ended, Staff Sergeant George Prey Jr. was exactly where he had begun, in a damp maintenance hangar working on P-51 engines. He had received no medals, no official commendations, and absolutely no public recognition for his profound innovation. The Army Air Forces officially credited the improved Me-262 kill ratio to vague, enhanced pilot training and tactical improvements, with zero mention of the emergency warp power setting in official histories. But the pilots knew the truth. On May 10, 1945, members of the 328th Fighter Squadron presented Prey with a deeply personal, unofficial gift: a propeller blade salvaged from a P-51 signed by 47 different pilots who had used his technique to shoot down the Me-262s. The simple, powerful inscription read, "To George Prey Jr., who made us fast enough. Because of you, we came home." Captain Robert Straubel, the top Me-262 killer of the war with 8 jet victories, wrote in his memoir published in 1987, "Every time I used that emergency power setting and felt the Mustang surge forward, I thought about the mechanic who figured it out. George Prey Jr. saved my life at least 3 times by giving me the speed I needed to catch those jets. He never received the recognition he deserved, but every pilot who flew Mustangs in 1945 knew who really won the war against the 262s. Innovation doesn't require a degree or a title. The emergency warp power setting quickly became standard doctrine in all post-war fighter operations. The U.S. Air Force, established in 1947, incorporated the technique into training manuals for every propeller-driven aircraft. The core principle, temporarily sacrificing engine longevity for maximum performance during critical combat situations, heavily influenced early jet fighter tactics during the Korean War. Even modern flight manuals for meticulously restored P-51 Mustangs still reference the Prey emergency power setting as a historical technique, though civilian operators are wisely cautioned not to use it due to the immense stress it places on vintage engines. Production records confirm that between January and May 1945, P-51 pilots, utilizing Freddy's technique, shot down 247 Me-262 jets, which is more than half of all jet kills officially credited to Allied fighters.
George Prey Jr. quietly returned to North Carolina after the war and worked as a civilian aircraft mechanic until his retirement in 1982. He consistently refused nearly all interviews about his wartime innovation, telling one persistent journalist in 1978, "I was just a mechanic doing my job. The pilots were the ones who had to use it in combat. They're the real heroes, not me." He passed away in 1994 at the age of 78, having never accepted any formal public recognition for changing the very course of the air war over Germany. His remarkable story raises a profoundly uncomfortable question that military organizations still wrestle with today. How many vital innovations are ruthlessly suppressed by rigid bureaucracy and dogmatic adherence to established procedures? How many critical problems remain unsolved because the individuals who possess the solutions lack the correct credentials or the necessary authority to simply be heard? The humble mechanic who barely graduated high school saw a possibility that aeronautical engineers with advanced degrees completely missed. He astutely recognized that the official technical manuals were optimizing for the wrong variables, that in the chaos of combat, raw maximum speed was far more important than either fuel efficiency or engine longevity. And he possessed the quiet courage to challenge the expert consensus when the lives of his fellow pilots depended directly on his insight. Staff Sergeant George Prey Jr. never flew a combat mission. He never once fired a shot at an enemy aircraft. But his unwavering refusal to accept that American fighters were simply too slow to catch German jets saved thousands of lives, and helped ensure victory in the air war over Europe. Sometimes the most impactful innovations emerge from the people no one expects. Sometimes the true solution to an impossible problem requires a person who doesn't know enough to understand why it supposedly cannot be done. And sometimes the greatest heroes are the ones who never seek a single moment of recognition, who simply do the work, solve the issue, and quietly permit others to take the credit. The next time someone tells you that something is truly impossible, remember the mechanic who made Mustangs faster by literally setting the engine backwards. Remember that expertise can easily blind us to simple, elegant solutions. And remember that the courage to challenge established thinking, even when you lack credentials, even when experts completely dismiss you, even when the vast bureaucracy orders you to stop, can in fact change the world. Because in the end, George Prey Jr. did not just make the P-51 faster. He proved that true innovation does not require a degree or a title. It requires observation, persistence, and the determined willingness to question authority when human lives hang in the balance. That lesson remains just as relevant today as it was over the deadly skies of Germany in 1945.